we have a lot of information on our website, and that's where we post all of our updates. So it's a good place to check back. And I am here today on behalf of our leadership team. So I'm the science team manager. We have three principal investigators on the project: Adam Wilson, Erin Hester, and Jasper Slingsby. Jasper's from the University of Cape Town, and Adam and Erin are from universities in the US. We also have our applications coordinator, Cherie Forbes, and our data guru, Phil Broderick. And then BioSCape as a project is actually much bigger than the leadership team. So we have 18 different research projects. It's more than 130 people and growing by the day. 50 different institutions and about half US and South Africa participation, which is something that we're really happy about. So this diagram, you can't read it on the slide, but this is on our website under the team tab. And you can zoom in and click on people's faces and click on the different projects to see what everyone is doing and see who's involved. So to position you all on some of the background for BioSCape, BioSCape is a biodiversity-focused project, and biodiversity is one of the most important things about life on Earth, but there are many other things that we also want to know about life on Earth. And some of these things we're really good at understanding, and some of these things we need to still make a lot of progress on. So one of the ways that we can understand Earth is using models. So this is a picture of the CMIP6 predictions, which is a model that predicts global surface temperature. And if you remember, in July 2023, there were a whole lot of alarming headlines about the Northern Hemisphere having like the hottest summer ever, and people were freaking out. And so you can see here on this graph, July 2023, even though it was hot, it was actually within what the model was predicting for surface temperature. So this is one of the things that we're quite good at predicting. Other things that we can predict, we might do it not with models, but with satellites. So this is an example of the MODIS satellites net primary productivity data product. So this tells us about the productivity of ecosystems all over the world at regular timeframes. And this is also very impressive and very cool. But neither of these things are yet telling us about biodiversity. And biodiversity is kind of different to things like productivity and carbon and temperature, because it's very specific to where you're trying to measure it. So the biodiversity in Cape Town, for example, is not the same as the biodiversity in, say, California, even though they both have like shrubs. So biodiversity requires a lot of field measurements. So you actually have to like go out and see what's out there and record observations. And these observations can be expensive and labor intensive to collect. And as a result, they're not equally distributed across the globe. So this picture over here tells us, is showing us the distribution of field biodiversity measurements. And you can see that there's a big difference between countries in terms of how much field biodiversity data they have. But even within these countries, there will be, this field data will be kind of very clustered, maybe only at a single point in time. And so this presents a real challenge for us if we want to kind of do continuous biodiversity monitoring. So for continuous biodiversity monitoring, something that would be really useful is if we could combine kind of like the coverage and frequency of satellite observations with the kind of site specificity of field observations. And so what we really need to do is look at these two things together to bring us one step closer to be able to measure biodiversity all over the globe. And this is a picture from a paper by Woody Turner, who's also involved in BioSCape. And it just shows that, like, if we really want to get at measuring biodiversity, we need to combine lots and lots of different kinds of data sources. And this is the idea that really brought on BioSCape, is this need to combine different kinds of data sources to take us closer to measuring global biodiversity. So if you want to measure global biodiversity using satellites, that's quite a big task and sounds very expensive and like a big mountain to climb. And so one of the ways that you might get closer to this eventual goal is to use airplanes, because you can take the same kinds of sensor that you would put on a satellite, but instead of launching it into space, you can put it on a plane and fly it over a very specific area. And at the same time as you fly it, collect a whole lot of different field measurements, and then kind of see how well the airplane and the sensor are able to capture what the field measurements are able to capture. And that'll give you some kind of idea about how successful a satellite with a similar kind of sensor would be at measuring biodiversity. So this is something that NASA does. NASA is the US National Aeronautics and Space Agency, which is like the US version of SANSA. They do like rockets and planets and stuff like that. And one of the things that they do is these airborne campaigns as a way to kind of see what is possible with these sensors before they go up on satellites. And as a space agency, you might be wondering, why do they care about biodiversity? And this is because they've spent, NASA spent years and years and years and lots of money developing kind of like the world's best technology for looking at stuff from far away. And originally they developed this technology to look at planets, but this technology actually has a lot of applicability for looking at Earth. And so NASA is now catching up with the fact that Earth is the most important planet. And instead of only looking out at other planets, it's now taking this technology and seeing how we can use it to better understand the planet that we live on. So what is this exciting new technology that NASA has been working on? So these are sensors. You can kind of think of them like cameras. So similar to, like, you know, if you have a camera on your phone and you are taking a picture of something, if you have a picture that is in black and white, then every single pixel in the picture will just have one value, like how black or white it is. And this will give you what's called a single band of information, so like a grayscale image. And this can tell you some things about a landscape, but it doesn't tell you that much information because it's just one band. If you take a color picture, then you have multiple bands of information. So this is called multispectral imagery. And so you might have red, green, and blue. Maybe you have an extra band that's maybe infrared information. And these multispectral images are probably the remote sensing kind of satellite images that we're most familiar with. So things like Landsat and Sentinel are these multispectral satellites. And what's exciting about this new technology is that we are now moving into a stage of hyperspectral imagery. So this hyperspectral imagery is called imaging spectroscopy. And instead of just capturing images in 3 or 4 or 7 colors, we're now capturing images in hundreds of different colors. So in lots of different bands of information all the way across the electromagnetic spectrum. So we're able to get so much more information, not just visible colors, but actually information in the UV range, thermal information, all kinds of all kinds of things that actually tells us so much more than we can even see with our eyes about a landscape. So these imaging spectroscopy sensors are the sensors that we use in BioSCape. And that's not all. We also have 2 lidar sensors. And one of these actually from SAEON, which we'll see in the next slide. But LiDAR is not like a camera at all. LiDAR is a sensor that shoots a laser down to the ground, and then the laser bounces around the vegetation and then back up to the plane. And that tells you something about the 3-dimensional structure of the vegetation. So what was BioSCape? BioSCape was or is ongoing an airborne campaign combined with a whole lot of field data collection. So during BioSCape, we had 3 planes flying, so 2 NASA planes and 1 SAEON plane. The SAEON plane had a LiDAR sensor on it, and one of the NASA planes also had a LiDAR sensor on it. And then we had 3 imaging spectrometers, and we flew for 6 weeks in October and November last year. Sorry, I think I've accidentally deleted a slide, but hopefully it'll come later, about field measurements. So we were flying over the Greater Cape Floristic region, which I'm sure, as all of you know, working for SAEON, I don't need to tell you about South Africa's amazing biodiversity and why this is such a cool place to do biodiversity research. So we were looking at ecosystems on land and also in the water. And in addition to the aquatic and terrestrial biodiversity, the other reason that South Africa is a cool place to do a project like this is because there's a lot of challenges here. So we have socioeconomic, we want to have good socioeconomic development, but we also want to protect ecosystem function and biodiversity. And so we kind of need to balance these two kind of outcomes that we're looking for. We have issues of climate change, so droughts and heat waves that are affecting things. We have alien invasions, as I'm sure you all know, are a really terrible problem. And so in this way, not only is it a biodiversity hotspot, but also it kind of is a representation of all of these challenges that happen all over the world. And so the things that we learn in BioSCape by collecting this data in South Africa will have applicability far beyond South Africa, which is really cool that we can kind of like be the place where this research gets done. So this is our BioSCape infographic, which you can also download on our website if you'd like to use it or have a look at it. So BioSCape is a remote sensing and field data campaign. So we're collecting all of these different kinds of data, both from the airplanes, and then also a whole lot of people collecting different biodiversity data sets on the ground. So I'll go through the kinds of biodiversity field data sets later on in the presentation, but it includes things like surveys of plants, looking at plant functional traits, taking DNA samples of plants to look at their evolutionary history, collecting environmental DNA in rivers to look at like the diversity in watersheds, doing bird counts using little recording devices to look at birds and frogs, just a ton of different kinds of field information. Oh, a whole lot of water samples in dams and in the ocean to look at phytoplankton. So really just a huge amount of data. And the idea with BioSCape is that we take these field data sets and combine them with the remote sensing data sets to produce biodiversity data products. So these are things: functional diversity, looking at taxonomic diversity, phylogenetic diversity, spectral diversity, lots of different kinds of diversity. And our hope is that by producing these data products and the research that happens around them, we can better understand nature's contributions to people through looking at things like shifting community composition, both in marine environments and, things like alien invasions on land, ecosystem disturbance, resilience, and recovery, including drought and fire dynamics, and ecosystem function, including things like freshwater supply and water quality and stuff like that. And then another reason, many reasons why BioSCape is exciting, but one of the really important things about it is that BioSCape was a once-off data collection using planes that happened last year. And as you know, with environmental data sets, it's really important to have kind of like ongoing data collection. So the types of data that were collected in BioSCape by the planes are going to be continuously collected by satellite. So NASA has two satellites. The first is PACE, which is focused on ocean ecosystems. So PACE actually just launched last month. So all of this data coming from PACE over the world's oceans is available. And then SBG is going to be launching in the coming years, and that's focused on inland and coastal ecosystems. So similar kinds of data to the data collected in BioSCape is going to be coming from that satellite at regular time intervals. So essentially what BioSCape is doing is preparing us for this new generation of remote sensing data that is coming, and really specifically, preparing the global community, but specifically preparing South Africa to be like a leader in this field, because there's nowhere else where a campaign like BioSCape has happened. And so it really like puts South Africa at the forefront of using these new remote sensing satellite technologies to measure biodiversity, which is really exciting for us, I think. There are also, I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are also some other satellites that are up. And these satellites also, again, collect a similar kind of data to what has been collected in BioSCape. And so these kind of fill some of the gaps in terms of repeat time measures and getting us ready for the next generation of satellites. So this is an example of a day in the life of BioSCape planes. So this is, you can see the little illustration on the right is one of our planes going out to collect data. I believe that was over the Cederberg. And this screenshot over here is our BioSCape data portal. You can access this on our website. This is not the actual data because the data is still being processed, but you can see where data was collected by the different instruments on the planes. And so if there's a specific field site that you are really excited about, you can go onto our data portal and see whether or not we flew over it. And this was my slide I was missing earlier. This is just a sample of some of the field data sets that also were collected as part of BioSCape. So we did a whole lot of vegetation surveys. We surveyed freshwater and marine phytoplankton communities. We looked at DNA and environmental DNA. And we looked at sound, little sound recorders that looked at bird and frog diversity. So it's not just data from the planes, it's actually this huge field data set that goes with it as well. And then I just wanted to highlight some of the activities that we've done with SAEON, because BioSCape wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration with SAEON. Jasper, who is one of the leaders of BioSCape, was at SAEON at the time that BioSCape was first being developed. SAEON has been super supportive of us, and they've been amazing, including Kogi. So one of the things that we did was participated in NASA's Space Apps Hackathon Challenge, and SAEON organized a local event where school kids from the area could come, and they spent the weekend working on a hacking challenge that was done at the same time as 320 locations all over the world. So there were nearly 250,000 participants in this, and SAEON was part of it. We also we had some of the BioSCape team members speak and participate in the graduate student conference, which was fantastic. And we worked with NASA's GLOBE program with SAEON to run a schools education program during the campaign. So this is a picture of some of the school kids on the beach collecting measurements. I think everyone had a really nice time, and this again also would not have been possible without SAEON. So I'm going to run through some of the briefly some of the expected data products, I guess, from BioSCape. So just to flag, the data is still being processed. It was only collected very recently. So this is what the different teams are working on. These data products are not yet available, but we are hoping that they will be soon. As you know, research can take a while, but this is the plan for the BioSCape data. So we have teams looking at mapping aquatic biodiversity and looking at drivers of change. So we have a team that is mapping kelp forests and ocean chemistry all along the coastline, and specifically looking at how different kelp communities will be affected by changes in ocean chemistry. Similarly, we also have a team that is looking at a whole bunch of estuaries along the coastline and how the vegetation in the estuaries will be impacted by sea level rise. We have two teams looking at phytoplankton. One team is working in marine environments and one team is working in freshwater environments. So phytoplankton is really important because it is the base of the aquatic food web. And it's also very important for water quality. So if you have a specific type of phytoplankton that becomes overabundant in, say, a dam, then that can affect drinking water quality. So being able to predict and measure when this is happening is really important for freshwater supplies. So we have two teams that are looking at phytoplankton. Then we have teams that are looking at kind of basic foundational ecosystem properties. So mapping things like evapotranspiration, which is a measure of ecosystem productivity, and also looking at the three-dimensional structure of vegetation. So this is on the right here, you have a screenshot of one of the lidar instruments in BioSCape. This is showing kind of a proxy for vegetation height all over the peninsula in Cape Point, which is pretty cool. So we'll have this over a lot of the Western Cape. And then we have teams that are going to be looking at plant functional traits. So making maps of things like chlorophyll, leaf mass per area, plant phenolics and other secondary compounds, nitrogen, all kinds of different biochemical functions. They can produce these very cool maps over the region, which is obviously super useful and very useful when you combine it with the functional traits of, for example, alien invasions. So this is going to allow us to map alien invasions with a much higher accuracy than we have been able to with previous remote sensing products. And what's specifically important about this new type of remote sensing data is that we can pick up, hopefully we're going to be able to pick up different species of aliens in different places, and also when invasions are still at a relatively low density. So you don't have to wait for the invasion to get to that like really dense stand stage before you're able to pick it up. And then we have two teams that are using really exciting new field methods to survey biodiversity. So one team is using environmental DNA. So environmental DNA is like little fragments of DNA that you would collect in, say, a river, and then you sequence them, and then that tells you about the biodiversity actually across the whole watershed, because the idea is that the rain washes the DNA of everything in the watershed into the river, and then you can collect samples and sequence that. And another team is looking at acoustic diversity using these little sound recorders that they put out into the field, and then they process those to pull out the diversity of animals that make noise. So this project is focusing on birds and frogs, which is also really exciting because it's a great way to do large scale surveys without needing to send out 1 million people to go bird watching. So as I mentioned, the BioSCape data is in the process of being, it has to like go through a processing stage before it can become available for use. But all of the data in BioSCape will be free and openly available for anyone who wants to use it. And we really, really, really would love to see as many people use the data as possible. We're going to be hosting it through NASA, one of NASA's data archiving centers, and hopefully have metadata records searchable through SAEON as well. So if you're on the SAEON platform, you should be able to find the BioSCape data. And part of something that has historically been an issue with some of these remote sensing data sets is that they can be very big. So what we've done is partnered with Amazon Web Services and some folks at NASA to set up a cloud computing environment for BioSCape. So you'll be able to log on to a website and view and analyze and process the BioSCape data without needing to download it to your laptop. So this means that you don't need to have a lot of storage on your laptop. You don't need to have a fancy processing chip because you can do everything on the cloud, which is also very exciting. So we're feeling good about that. And then, as I said, the data is not yet available, but I do want to highly recommend that you have a look at our website. We have a page that runs through a bunch of resources for engaging with BioSCape. So we have some webinars about the data. We have some coding notebooks available about how to use the kinds of data that are going to become available, links to download example data sets, training recordings. There's a whole lot of resources on the website. So if you'd like to learn more about this exciting data set, you should have a look there. And then, as I mentioned, this is largely funded by NASA, but also very, very importantly supported by the NRF and SAEON, as well as all of these other organizations. And BioSCape really is an international collaboration between the US and South Africa, and it wouldn't have been possible without people from both sides. And so we are really hoping that this positive and collaborative partnership continues into the future. And we're very grateful for all of the institutions that have supported us. And this is my email address. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any questions. You're welcome to also follow up over email if there's anything I can help with. And thank you so much, Kogi, for having me.
On behalf of NRF SAEON, Dr. Anabelle Cardoso, we want to thank you for sharing valuable insights on BioScapes and future plans for the data. We now open the floor to all our guests. They could raise their hand to ask questions, or they could put their questions in the chats. We're looking forward to engaging with you, so please feel free to raise your hands and ask questions.
I see there are possibly some questions in the chat. Oh, no, it is an AI assistant in the chat. Never mind.
Okay, so if there's no questions, Anabelle, I have a question for you. So I would like to find out, what are your future plans for training our own South African early career researchers once you have uploaded the data on your NASA site, as well as having access through the SAEON site?
Yeah, so capacity building is obviously super important, especially because these data are new and they're complex. They're like not super easy data to work with. And so we are partnering with we have two NASA organizations that are helping us develop training materials. So we're working with NASA's Applied Remote Sensing Training Program to put on a workshop. So they have one online workshop that's already available for people to view, and we are this is hot off the press. It's not official yet, but we're working. They're hopefully going to be coming to Cape Town later this year to run an in-person workshop alongside NASA's Data Archiving Center, who are also going to be joining them hopefully for that in-person workshop, which is hot off the press, hopefully also a collaboration with SAEON. We're busy working on that at the moment, and as soon as we have the details finalized, it will be up on the website. And then in addition to the workshop, we are going to be creating, and we have already created a whole lot of capacity building materials, and we'll be continuing to create capacity building materials, and everything is fully free and open access. So we hope to just continue adding to the library of training materials that are available. And the current training materials are already available on our website on the Engage tab.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Anabelle. There are some questions in the chat. If you could, so the first one is from Sue. She wants to know, when can we fly other key SAEON or FTON sites?
That is a great question, outside of, unfortunately, my control. But yeah, I think hopefully as you know, as people see how useful this data is, there'll be interest from the people in power to continue collecting this exciting remote sensing data over more areas of South Africa. That would be great. And then the second question, is there a timeline as to when PACE data becomes available since launch? So PACE launched, I think it should be up on their website. And I think the first few weeks they do calibration, but my understanding is that the PACE data should be available very soon. Yeah, like in the next few weeks, as far as I know, but I believe that their website does have a timeline.
Okay, thank you, Anabelle. I see there are no more questions. So we would just like to share with our guests that our next seminar will be on the 4th of April, and that's going to be hosted by Angelovo's Node postdoc, Tetsi Maponga. And the topic is mistletoe, a parasite on the ecosystem. So we look forward to you all joining us for our next seminar, 4th of April. Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye.
Thanks so much.